I'd like to ask you about playfulness, which matters to me more and more. I seem to... Playfulness. Being able to, knowing that if I tackle a piece of work with a certain solemnity, however serious I am, it sort of destroys itself. But if there is in it an element of, in my approach, of playfulness, of letting it happen.
And what do you mean by playfulness?
Well, I suppose over-solemnity is rather conceited. I mean, you have an idea that you'd like to do this, you'd like to finish it. You have the end in the beginning. You know what it's going to be. What I mean by playfulness is allowing for things to come in from the side, which you hadn't expected. Thoughts or notions.
Yes. You mean when you're working, you're concentrating.
Yes.
And when that concentration is not focused, then the other things...
Yes, you see, I was brought up, like many of us, in a very puritanical way, brought up to believe that effort was a fine thing. And then I believe I'm having to learn that effort is a double-edged matter, and that it can be over-solemn, it can push you towards conclusions, it can blind you and deafen you to all sorts of things you should be hearing and seeing. And that you need, as I need, I feel, to kind of sit back and play more. Does that...
Yeah, that's what, letting other thoughts come in rather than have one continuous...
That's right.
Effort and thought.
Yes, and let it organically shift so that it shapes itself organically, maybe in a direction you hadn't intended.
Which would be, would you say that distraction is necessary? It is that.
Yes, it is distraction, isn't it? It's to do with, well, if I could use a phrase like mindful distraction. It's not merely being open to anything.
Empty-minded.
That's right.
So, concentration, a sense of distraction of which you are aware.
That's right. Feels quite important.
Yeah. But when you are aware that it's distraction, is it distraction?
It's extremely subtle concentration, perhaps.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes, I feel it to be. I feel that when an element of, well, it's connected with fear, I think. When an element of fear comes into it, a fear that you may go wrong or that something unwelcome may happen, then it freezes you. And you think you're concentrating, you're actually shutting out. Is that, would you say that's correct?
That's partly, isn't it, only... What can we discuss what is concentration and then come to the other? What do we mean when we say concentrate? To focus one's thought.
Focus feels a bit positive, as though your intention is maybe a little too much in it.
Yeah, concentrate on what one is doing.
Yes.
Don't let anything come in.
To be available totally to what one is doing.
Yes, all right.
Is another way of putting it.
What does that do when one is so centered, focused? Aren't you shutting off every other form of thought, every other form of distraction, if you can use that word?
Yes.
So you build a wall around yourself and say, no, please, don't think of anything, let's think about this.
There's a distinction, isn't there, though, between somebody, as it were, when you did that gesture, it was a slightly worried gesture, you know, please don't bother me, I'm concentrating on this.
That's right.
Now, that, I think, is possibly, although I certainly do it quite a lot, it seems to me to have fear in it and to be probably not so useful as an openness to a thing which merely quietly presses other things to the side.
I'm not sure.
Ah. Tell me more.
I mean, could we begin by discussing what makes us concentrate? Will, desire, an end to achieve, a motive, a direction, a purpose, a intensified desire which is a will, and say, this I must do. This is necessary, I concentrate. And therefore, I push aside every other thought comes in. So I build a wall around myself for a moment. And there. So that's a form of resistance. That's a form of may I put it differently? It's a self-centered attempt to hold something. Which then becomes fear.
Yes, I see. It's quite certain, I find, that when you describe that and the shutting out, I know that that is a prelude to failure.
Yes.
It's the thing that happens before you can't do it.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes.
So I'm interested in the further state of what is the state then in which you are really, well, we have to use the word concentrate again because it's the language, but perhaps there is another word where you are really freely open and available for...
Yeah, another word, attention.
Attention, more useful, yes.
But that's much more complicated. Not what is available, but to attain.
In attention, do you allow yourself to be surprised by things that come into you?
I would like to discuss that a little bit. When one is attending, which means giving all your energy, all your sensitivity, your nervous organism as well. Not only hearing, eyes, everything is tremendously alive. In that state of attention, there is no center as the me attending. Therefore, there is no fear in that.
Ah, yes.
I don't know if you make myself clear.
I understand, absolutely, yeah.
We have been trained from childhood to attain, to concentrate. Teach us and concentrate. Don't look out of the window. And so there's a contradiction there. I won't look out.
That's right.
So fear begins. So effort.
So why I started talking about playfulness was entirely in this area, that I'm interested in that very necessary and fearless attention, you may say, which is not unserious, but it isn't solemn. There's a little
attention
line.
Is attention.
It's just where it is.
Sir.
See, I'm interested in the word play because it happens that professionally, all my life, as a child who never got tired of stories, that's been my burden and my pleasure. So I naturally work in a theatre, and I tell stories to myself and others, or I write them. And then the word play, of course, happens to be the word given to these events. And when I was in India making some films...
You saw that film, that statue
Which?
Of Shiva playing.
Playing, absolutely. And Leela as
Of
play.
course, Leela is.
And I wanted you to talk to me about that, because it seems wonderful that the word play should actually be the word to describe the way things are.
That's why when I dancing, playing football, playing golf and so on.
Sure.
Why have those things become important? You play them.
Yes.
You dance.
Yes.
But when we say, I say release,
Yes.
away from concentration.
Yes.
That's what we are doing. Work all day in an office, 9 to 5 or whatever it is, and then go to a bar, drink, distracted, cinema, this, that, the other. So there is tremendous contradiction in this.
And none of it is play.
None of it is play.
None of it. No.
It's a distraction. Distraction isn't a play.
I have an increasing feeling, I mean, I don't give myself programs for what I'm on earth for, but I give myself a little program just to think that that's my job, it seems to me, is to increase the amount of play. In one way of putting it. Does that make sense to you? To increase the possibility in my life, or even in things which could be drudgery. It's kind of to avoid drudgery. That does not mean altering your job.
No, of course not. But suppose if we drop the word distraction, play for a moment, then what happens?
How do you mean?
I've been working in the factory, and it's a terribly tiring, dirty, noisy, smelly job. I come home or go to bar, and there I relax. Take a drink and all the rest. Go home, in that state of relaxation, the wife begins to quarrel, say something. I get irritated, and we keep that up. And in between sex and all that, but I keep that going. So sex becomes a distraction. You follow? So the whole thing, the job forces me to distraction. All the nightclub, you know the word.
Yeah, sure. I suppose I can look on quite areas of my life. I think of myself as very free-footed because I move from job to job. That in another sense, I move from distraction to distraction. I go to a situation for comfort. If you take on a new job, it feels comfortable temporarily, and then eventually it becomes its own straitjacket and imprisons you, and you have to move from that prison. So I don't know quite, well, I know there must be an alternative.
See, in all this, there is an element of fear.
Yeah.
I'm not doing my job properly. I drank too much, or sex too much. And my God, I'm losing, you follow? So there's this cycle of fear set going.
Now, we can't crack that cycle by cracking that cycle, can we?
First of all, do we do anything that we love?
Not much.
No.
If anything.
If any. One is forced by circumstances. Specialized as a carpenter or as a scientist or a writer and all that. So gradually, the brain itself becomes very, very narrow, limited. And that limitation itself becomes a bore. Right? And then break that. Go to play beer, sex, nightclubs, go golf, football.
There's almost a process in each of these things that for the moment of change, it's almost as if a whiff of oxygen is given to you, a whiff of extra energy at the moment of change. And then as soon as you get into the next phase, whatever it is, beer or sex or whatever the distraction may be, it hardens up and the oxygen is then drawn away.
So is there an energy which is not wasted at all. And therefore no fear.
And can this energy ever be constantly available?
It is there.
Is it there?
Of course. But I misuse it. I do something which I hate to do. I want to go on a lovely morning like this for a walk, but my wife says, let's go to church.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Or
So what are we frightened of then?
Are we talking, that's what I wanted to ask, are we talking of the ending of fear and therefore living, not playing and not playing?
Do you think we think we'll die?
Huh?
Do you think we will die if we don't have the next diversion?
Of course. There's this terrible fear of death.
In many subtle forms?
Of course. So, look, I mean, I don't know if you want to go into all that.
Please, I do, yes.
That involves a becoming. Not only physical becoming, I'm weak but I must get strong. I haven't run so much but I will get physically well. And I make tremendous efforts towards that. They are all doing that now, that's the fashion. And has that spilt over into the psychological realm? I don't know if I'm conveying.
Yes, I understand. You mean, we're not talking about the fear of death, we're talking about trying to avoid the cycle of life in a way.
Yes.
Yes.
Therefore, if I'm afraid of life, so the whole way of living has become a movement in fear. Fear of death, fear of losing job, fear of my wife or husband, I'm not becoming a successful man. This whole way of living has become step by step leading to ultimate fear of death.
Yes, good. That's wonderful, yes. All fear has these roots going back to fear of death. And the moment that, if fear is to be absent at any moment, it's some conquest of death.
No, just make it. If we understand living, what the significance of living, not this perpetual battle, struggle, conflict. I must have, I'm more, better. The constant measurement with myself with somebody else. He's famous, but I must become famous. He's on the television, I'm not. This terrible sense of poverty.
Yes.
And in the attempt to be rich, there is the burden of fear. I may never get rich because there's somebody much richer.
Sure. So, in a sense, I see that these little prisons we inhabit one by one, these little distractions, are the fact that we know as we go into them that they're incomplete. There is something in us that knows that it won't work. So that's the cause of great misery. I mean, at least if you go into a place where you think it may be nice, you're not deceiving yourself until it becomes nasty. but there's something in us that knows that it doesn't work.
We know it doesn't work, but we go on with it.
Isn't that strange? Mm.
Like war, we know it's appalling.
Yes.
Most wasteful, destructive. I don't know, I heard the other day, when they had the D-Day celebration.
Yes.
20,000 young men were killed at first. Huh?
First attack.
First. 20,000.
Mm.
And the politicians walk as though.
Mm. The problem is, isn't it, of course, you see, now if you, for instance, express, if you won't watch a D-Day celebration or you pour scorn on the whole thing of these memorials, you're considered to be disrespectful to those who died, which is quite the opposite. I mean, it's infuriating.
Sounds so monstrous.
Actually, what you want to say is, because I love those who died, I don't want to have anything to do with the poppies.
Poppies, quite.
So when one... for some period of years, when I was making films that had a name religion over them, I began to find, obviously, that religions obviously frequently been used as temporary havens from fear of death. Obviously, they have. But of course, one can't just stop there, because anything, a house, can be a religion in that sense, or a job or a distraction. So the world isn't quite so tidy, is it?
Yes, sir.
If we could only say the religions are doing it, we'd feel free. But it isn't the case.
So what are we talking about?
Well, I'm talking about fear of death. I feel, which isn't, because I feel it to be pervasive, and I can't understand why, moment by moment in my life, there is some sort of censor or judge or...
Would you say death is part of play?
Absolutely. In the sense that good death is part of play. Huh? The good death is part of play.
What do you mean by good death?
Well, I just mean the possibility, if you climb a thing and may fall off it and don't care, then there's the possibility of the fall, of the other side of the action. That's what I mean by a good death, a kind of the other part, the other half of the action, is what I mean by good
Say,
death.
for example, a very rich man who's got everything in life, writes books, and at the end of his day, had a jolly good life, and dies. Right?
Yes.
And there are those who are paralyzed or maimed, and all those terrible cases that are more and more increasing in the world. To them, death may be an extraordinary event.
What may be an extraordinary event?
The paralyzed.
Yes.
The invalids, the incurables. Are we talking about fear of death or fear of life, which makes us fearful of death?
That's more like it.
So, why are we afraid of life? What is the cause, what is the reason, many reasons that makes one fearful of living?
I wish I knew.
One of the, let's discuss,
Please.
One of it is, from childhood, I'm forced to learn, memorize. And I'm trained to meet problems. One's brain has been conditioned to solve mathematical problems from childhood. College, university, problems. So the brain is conditioned to problems. And then it meets problems. And is resolution of the problem is making the problem more complicated, and in the solution of it, increase 10 different other problems. That's what the politicians are doing.
So you're talking about, I get something quite good. Our education seems, as you describe it, to be a series of trial runs for solving problems. But the problem when it arises is not the problem that you've done the trial run on, ever.
No. Therefore, what happens?
You apply the rules. You apply the rules you've learned in the hope that they work.
They don't.
And they don't.
So that's one of the real problems of human beings, to approach a problem without having problems at all.
Very good. It would not be, yes, in fact, I suppose, the way you're taught defines the problem for you, but the problem may be quite different.
Yes.
So you can only solve the problems you've been taught to solve. You can only see as problems things that you've been taught to solve, and maybe much greater and more terrifying things are killing you.
Yeah, and therefore you approach it with a brain that is trained to problem.
Yes.
Same, I mean, most religious people in the world believe in God. And to reach that Godhead, you must torture yourself, you must fast, you must undergo every kind of denial, no sex, don't look around you, don't feel anything, control your desires, you follow. And we are conditioned to that. So to reach God, I go through all this. And you become a saint.
Isn't it crazy when you come to think of it that in Christian scriptures, for instance, there's an enormous amount of stuff about people who are outsiders, about the prostitute and so on. But in the living, as the religion becomes hardened and institutionalized, it isn't so, is it?
You're crazy. So just let's look at it for a minute. We are afraid of living. Because we've lost, then we say, what is the significance of living? What's the meaning of life? And not finding any, we invent. The philosophers come in, the specialists come in, and the psychologists come. You follow? We invent. And that invention becomes our security. Then I hold to that. And fight for that, kill for that.
It's like a poison, isn't it?
It seems
like a poison when it's taken in.
This is what's happening, sir.
You know why I'm here, actually. One of the reasons, I'll tell you a little story that happened last time. That when I came here for the first time, there was 2 hours to wait, and I was put in a room and shown videotapes of you. And over 2 hours, I conceived quite a strong dislike for you.
Dislike?
Dislike.
Good.
A strong dislike. And then I went with my dislike to have lunch, and a voice behind me said, "You should try the grated carrot. It's very good." And that was you, and we got on fine after that. Now, this is the curious thing, you see. I was obviously manufacturing. I was educating myself in you. I was trying to see what you were about. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And getting all sorts of notions. And the effect of them was deeply depressing.
Yeah.
And yet, carrots and your presence was fine. I have no problem with that. So I'm extremely keen that anything we should say today should not be capable of giving any of that sort of feeling that we have anything of importance. Although, you never know. Young.
We are discussing, aren't we, why life has become so meaningless.
Yeah.
The tree doesn't ask that question. The tiger doesn't ask that question. right? He says, I'm living. So, sir, if there is no conflict in living, I would never ask that question. I don't know if I'm convinced.
No, I didn't understand the last sentence.
If there is no conflict in one's life,
yes,
no conflict, whatever,
yes,
you would never ask that question.
The question of the meaningless of life.
Significant. What is the meaning of it all?
Because implied in it is an idea of some perfection which you ought to be having.
Yeah.
This is another fiction. So we sort of blunder from fiction to fiction.
Illusion to illusion, fancied, and so on.
And I suppose the awful truth is that any system...
What makes human beings ask this question? Because in their own life it has no meaning. Going to the office from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock till you're 60. Responsibilities, house, mortgage, insurance. And the conflict between relationships and so on, so on, so on. And at 65, 70, 80, you pop off. And then you say, what's the meaning of it?
What was it about?
Then there is death. And then you say, I'm going to die, I hope I'll live next life. You follow?
Yes.
That whole cycle begins. Hope, despair, depression, fear. I have achieved so much this life. And what does it mean, coming to the end of it all? I was told of a man, I met them both, who were enormously rich, enormous. His cupboards were filled with them, gold, paper money of every description, especially Swiss. And he was dying. He said, as I can't take it with me, keep it all open, keep all the cupboards open.
Yes.
So that I can look at them as I'm dying.
Yeah.
Just think of...
Wonderful. What a wonderful last thought. Yes. I just have a feeling, you see, when you talk about death has a sort of, I mean, we know it's the obscenity, we know it's the thing we may not talk about. I mean, you know, last century was sex, we can't talk about death this century. I've got a feeling the absence of really living with it, sitting with it, just makes our situation so impossible.
I'm not sure, sir. After all, death means total ending. All the memories, all the experience, the knowledge, the attachments, the fears, the sorrows, the anxieties. It's like somebody cutting all the thread which we have gathered to pieces. Ending. I think we ought to discuss what is the ending. Do we ever end? Or in the ending there is another continuity? I don't know.
It seems unnecessary. Yes, I don't know. I haven't had ever much sense of starting, or not much sense of the time going on, and I have not much sense of my ending either. So I have every reason to believe that what is around will certainly take an...
No.
Am I making sense?
Oh, yes. What is ending? That is death, right?
Well,
I may believe I shall be born next life.
Death is something observed by somebody else, surely.
Not only by somebody, I want to believe it. It's comforting.
You want to think that...
I want to believe it. It gives me great comfort. Say, but at least I have another chance.
I see what you mean.
I mean, whole Asiatic world believes in reincarnation. And some of that is accepted here now. Books are written, people say, I believe, all the rest.
Well, the afterlife, anyway. I mean, the afterlife, which is well generally believed, I think, in this country and in this tradition.
You hear Christian world, they believe in a different form of resurrection and so on.
This is a subtle way of keeping you quiet about what's going on now.
Yeah. So there is death, ending, and there is living. The living has become so, we don't have to go into it, we know it very well. And there is that waiting. Not waiting, is there. We're all going to pop off, die. That's the question, right? There's a time interval. The time interval may be 100 years, or 5 years, or 50 years. It's time interval. And that during that time interval, I'm living. I'm acting, living, suffering, despair, all the rest of it. I haven't solved this problem, this way of living. If there is a way of living in which there is no pain, there is no suffering, you follow? And there is also the other, which is the ending of all this. Now, if there was no time interval, the two are together.
Yeah.
Therefore, which means ending everything every day.
Yes, yes.
Your attachment, this is my school, my problem. You follow? That makes the brain so small, limited.
But our means of attachment are so extraordinary, aren't they? I mean, one can congratulate oneself on getting rid of attachment A, while B to Z line up to take over.
Yes,
It's an extraordinary killing problem.
so is it possible to live that way?
What do you think?
Oh yes, that's the only way to live, otherwise you go through hell.
Sure.
So that life is not, rather, life contains death, living is death. So, every day, what you have collected, put it aside.
Sure.
If I'm attached to this house, I know death says, oh boy, you can't. It's the end of you. So I said, all right, I'll be free of attachment to this house. Be not attached. You follow? Not the same.
Yes, anatta, yes,
You're
that's right.
completely free of it.
And yet use it. This is the problem, that
Oh, that's where...
non-attachment can frequently go into a forms of resistance.
No. So I'm living in this house. I'm responsible for this house. I'm responsible for what is happening here. But also I'm going to die. So while I'm living, that day I'm fully responsible.
And you're not responsible for the day when you're not here.
Yeah.
Very good. There must be something in us which thinks that life will hurt if we live it.
Life hurts.
If we live it.
Yes, sir.
We must have a feeling. You see, while the mind will say, oh yes, I know that it's stupid to believe in whatever it is, relationships or drink or the job or whatever it is, to be a little haven, while the mind is saying that, it must also subtly, with a quiet voice, be saying, but the alternative is more terrifying.
You see, that's why when I was to inquire, is there a becoming? And therefore, the ending of becoming is fear.
Ending of becoming is fear, yes.
And is there a psychological becoming at all? But there is a becoming in the world. I mean, one is apprenticed to a master carpenter, and you gradually work with him till you become as good as him.
Sure.
That same attitude or that same activity is spilled over or extended into the other field. Psychological, the inner field, I must become something. If I don't, I'm lost. I'm a failure, I'm depressed. Look, you have become something, I'm nobody.
That implies somehow that the later state is preferable to the earlier, that the master is preferable to the apprentice. I have a sort of feeling that the people I admire, as well as having their calendar age, have also stuck at another age.
Yes,
the people I really like are about 3 years old. Does that
Children.
Yes, but also people who have got that curious sort of wide-eyed thing. It's strange. So I'm always a bit suspicious at the thought of building up to anything or a growth to something. I have a feeling that it's already been neglected. Does that make sense? That it's already been here, reclaiming one's childhood in some way. And any way that one tries to devise to, as it were, break out of one's little prisons, whatever it is, because it's an idea, has the fear written into itself as an idea.
Idea, quite.
So we are curiously...
So idea becomes fear.
That's right. So, and the idea of liberation is fear. So we wait.
No.
What do we do then?
Whether it's possible to end fear.
To end fear.
End fear.
Yes.
Not of a particular fear, but end fear. The whole tree of fear. And we are trying to trim the fears, you know.
Yes. What's the axe? How did you get at it? How do you...
Yeah, we'll go into it. What is time?
What is time?
Not by the watch.
No.
Clock. Sun rising, sun setting.
I think I can only understand time from something that's past. Is that right?
You've said it. So time is that which has happened yesterday.
That gives me the idea of time.
Yeah. That which has happened yesterday.
That's right.
Or 1,000 yesterdays. Or 45,000 years. Man supposed to be on earth. That is the whole duration or 45,000 years, which is in the present.
A thought is in the present, and everything we know of it is in the
Yes,
present.
all that is in the present.
Yeah.
And the future is the present.
A projection. We assume there's going to be one, and we make it into a fiction.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, sure. You can't have it tomorrow. You've got to have it now.
No, no. The past is, we say, is now, the present.
That's how we must take it, yes.
But it's so,
Yeah,
actuality.
sure.
I remember meeting you last year.
That's right.
And so there's that duration of time.
Exactly.
The recognition, if I recognize it. And the future is the same as now. Because I'll meet you again next year and say, yes, hello, how So the future is also now. So the present contains the past, the present, and the future. So there is no future. I don't see what
Yes, I do see what you mean. Yes.
The future is what you are now.
It's amazing how we inhabit this future, invented
yes,
future, with ill possibilities and Lord knows what. Yes.
So the future is now. And if there is no breaking down of the me now, I'll be tomorrow exactly the same. So I question whether there is any psychological evolution at all. You understand?
Yes, I do.
There isn't any.
There doesn't seem to be able to be,
Of course
except
not.
some fiction again that somebody has invented in observing you. Yes.
So I see, for me, there is no more or better. Better is future.
Good, yes.
Better is measurement, what I should be. And so what I should be is an avoidance of what I am. So that creates a conflict.
Yes.
So if I actually, not theoretically or sentimentally, the actual fact that the whole of time is now. Therefore, there is no becoming, no ideal to be reached.
That's such a radical thought. I mean, you know, there's a feeling about it that one's kind of heard it. It's not an unfamiliar thought, but it's desperately unfamiliar. It challenges everything which one lives by. Tell me about this axe as well. I mean,
I'm coming.
Because I want to take it away.
So what is change? If I change according to the future ideal, that ideal is projected by thought, which is also implied time. Thought is time. So, if one really grasps the depth of this statement or the feeling of time is all now. And so therefore, there is no tomorrow. In the sense, I will be something tomorrow. So there is an ending to conflict.
Yeah.
Which is an enormous factor. We've accepted conflict as a way of life. There is no conflict at all. That is, I have to understand change. I am this, but if I don't change, I'll be exactly tomorrow what I am now. So what is change? Is there psychological change at all? I don't even see. Or only what is? And the giving attention to what is the ending of what is.
Yes.
But one can't give a total attention to what is when you have got an ideal.
Yeah, that's right.
When we say, I was asked to speak at the United Nations. It's a contradictory in terms, United Nations, first of all. And they say we must gather together, become friends, with all that blah. And it never takes place. Because the principle is wrong. My country and your country. My God and your God. The Russians have their ideal. And so, if one really feels the depth of this, all time is now. The whole, it's like a lightning that changes.
When or if all time, when you say all time is now always joyous?
Huh?
Is now always happy?
I don't use the word happy.
Oh, all right. You see...
Why should it be happy?
No, quite. That's my point.
Why should it be anything?
Anything, indeed. You
know, so there's something which we should go into for time. And what is it to be nothing? Because we want to be something. The wanting is a sense of lacking. I haven't got a good house, I want a better house. I don't know all the knowledge of books, I must read. So there's this tremendous craving. And for what is the craving for? I'm not a philosopher, I'm not talking...
No, I know.
To me, that's what are we craving for? We want peace, we crave for peace, and we live violently.
Yeah, we always look for the sources of the violence outside ourselves.
That's it. And therefore we say non-violence. While a human being is violent, living violently, fighting, quarreling, conflict, and is working for peace.
Now, I'll tell you actually where my happy... I wasn't really talking about happy in the sense that I think would cause a problem. It was just... I remember there was a thing at a big exhibition at Olympia of a mind, spirit and something or other. There were many little booths with various people, various religious persuasions there, and they were all smiling. And they were selling this sort of smile, this blissed out quality, you know? And I ached to have one booth where everybody in it had a splitting headache. You know what I mean? And I just wanted to kind of go to them and be there. Right. Not because it was either bad or good, but that's also one mustn't be kind of wanted. There's the very great difficulty. I mean, anything you say, it can so easily be associated with extremely destructive thoughts, can't it, too?
Quite.
I mean, this is your burden.
Yeah. So the word change implies I am this, I must be that.
Want to be that.
We are conditioned from childhood to that.
To expect it.
So heavily conditioned. I see a small car, I must have a bigger car. I see you on the television, and by God, why am I not there?
We should be there together, you see.
You know, this tremendous craving, not just for publicity and that, but the inner craving for God, for illumination, for living a right life, and that we must all be together. Why do we have such craving?
I don't know. There's a great unlovedness about it, a feeling of actually that you're not loved, and that possibly the larger car will put its arms around you in a way that the smaller car doesn't, and will make up for this. It's a displaced feeling of lack of affection, I would have thought, isn't it?
Partly. It is it in oneself the sense of insufficiency? I'm not loved.
That feels to me quite real as a
I'm not loved. I'm not loved by that woman or by that man. And I must be loved by that man or by that woman. But that leads to a very other complex question. What is love?
I would tend to say possessiveness.
Of course it is. Attachment, possessiveness, jealousy, sexual pleasure, desire for more.
It's also self-love, isn't it? I want to experience it.
It's all, we call all that area love.
Yes, yes.
Some person told me, how can they be loved without jealousy? Which means without hate.
Yes.
You follow?
Sure. Yes. Well, in the sense of possession, they can't. Yes.
And then for one asks, what is the relationship between love and death?
Love in the sense we're talking about it. This possession.
Possession, all that, the whole idea. In that one word, so much things are contained.
So if you're saying perfect love casteth out fear, it's not perfect.
I don't know what. Don't
no, exactly. I know. It's a killer.
If you ask that question, sir, what is love? And what is that state of love with death? The love in the ordinary sense of that word.
If it
is
feels
there a relationship at all? And if it has a relationship, how does that show itself? How does that manifest itself?
I can see love in the sense we're talking about it as a series of faulty insurance schemes against death.
Yes.
Where the insurance house is really bound to collapse. But you still take out the insurance.
First of all, we never asked that question.
The connection between love, no. As we're plunging into love, we certainly don't.
Yeah. Now, if you ask that question, I put you that question, if I may. What's your response to it? To that question.
The connection?
Yeah. What's the connection? What's the relationship? Is there any relationship? If there is, what is nature?
Well, it feels like an attempt to ward it off, to have it not happen. It's a possession in the terms we're talking about. It is an attempt to have a permanence where there can be no permanence. Therefore, it's an attempt to contradict the fact that things die.
Death is impermanent.
Death is impermanent. Death is a permanent word to describe an impermanence.
Yeah.
Happening.
Death is impermanent.
Yeah.
And possessiveness, hoping for permanence.
Absolutely. An attempt to make it go on forever.
Go on forever.
Yes. It's curious how love poetry, at least cheap love poetry, has always got a doing everything forever.
Oh, I know.
Isn't it? Good love poetry is usually about things collapsing.
What is the relationship? What is the relationship between darkness and light?
Well, you can't have one without the other.
No. To us, that is that. You can't. But I'm asking the relationship between the two.
Could you tell me?
That is darkness. We know when there is no moonlight, no stars, nothing. Dark in a forest. I've been like dark, absolutely impenetrable darkness. And the sun comes up and everything is light. What's the relationship between that and that?
You tell me.
I don't think there is any.
Really?
Light is light. But let me put it the other way. What is the relationship between good and bad? Is there a relationship at all?
Well, if I could, before we do good and bad, if I could do dark and light, if I'm asked to describe something,
yes.
If I'm asked to describe it, then I do need the presence of one before I can do the other. For instance, if I'm describing this forest in which I can't see a tree, that's darkness. And then, of course, when the light comes up, the trees become visible.
So you are judging light and darkness according to your perception.
Yes, that's right.
That's obviously.
Yes, that's right. But it's only when I come to have to describe it that the relationship exists because of that.
But move a little further, deeper. What is the relationship between that which is good and that which is so-called evil or bad? Is the good born out of the bad? Because I know what is bad, or experience that which is painful, bad, all the rest of it. And so I'm moving or trying to get away from the bad to the good.
I would use good or bad to describe very temporary effects.
No,
I'm not getting your drift.
Is good temporary?
Yes.
That which is good, that which is beautiful, it's not temporary.
Why not?
I'll show you, let's look at it for a minute. If the good, or any other word you like to use, is the outcome of the bad, has its root in the bad, then it's not good. It's part of the bad. So every opposite has the root in its own opposite.
Good, I get that.
So is there a good which is not born out of the bad?
Not something that I could give that word to.
Huh?
I couldn't give that word to it because we've
give
already
another
used
word,
it.
Doesn't matter. The good old-fashioned word, the good, the beautiful, the truth. But now, I question altogether whether there is an opposite at all.
To a good in the sense we're talking
to
about.
Opposite.
Any opposite.
Any opposite.
Yes, yes.
Of course there is man, woman, tall, short.
Sure. These are conveniences.
Yeah. Apart from the conveniences, is there something so absolute and not related to the relevant?
I would be always conditional myself
Yes.
about handling it. I couldn't do it in any other way.
Yeah.
I'd be very frightened of people who do because they become murderers.
Oh, no, on the contrary.
What do you mean?
I mean, the freedom of goodness, not the misuse of freedom, of good, of freedom. The misuse of freedom is what is happening in the world. But freedom is good. It has goodness quality in it. I don't like to use the word moral virtue and all that has no meaning now. But that sense of depth in it.
Well, we're somehow alongside fear again, an absence of fear.
That's what, of course.
Aren't we?
That's why we said, is it possible to be free of fear? Totally. Not what might happen of which I'm afraid, or that which has happened of which I'm afraid. But these two elements, the past and the future, is now. Right? So, can the now, which is fear, be completely wiped away?
Almost the presence of now, as you would handle it, is dependent on one's having these fictions of past and future with one.
That's right.
So even to talk about now is risky.
Yes, but one has to use that word present now. You're sitting there and I'm sitting
Sure.
there. That's now.
Yep. But you've got to get the scalpel further.
Of course, of course. I mean, you have to have a little bit subtlety as other people are.
Yes. That's right. But the fear remains until the knife has gone much further
That's it.
than now.
Yes, of course. So what is fear? No, not theoretically, actually in my heart, in one's brain. What is fear? How does it come? What is the source of it, the root of it, the beginning of it?
Roughly off the top of my head, it's something to do with not being in the right place, a feeling of not filling where you should be. It's an ought is involved in fear. You ought to be this shape, that shape.
We've said that.
Yeah.
You ought to be, I will
Yeah.
be. Let's put
You're talking about another fear.
Fear. All this is fear. What's the root of it? I mean, we said fear is like a vast tree. That there's a marvelous tree here, an oak. It covers the ground, an acre.
Really, so.
Now, our fear is like that. But the root of that oak tree is there in the center.
Mm. Mm.
The branches are enormous.
Mm. What is the root there? How would you describe the root? Are you asking me to describe it?
How, not describe, the fact of it is time and thought.
Mm. Mm. We can play with thought, but not...
No, time and thought are the root of fear. We are trying to get to be taught to understand whether it's possible to be free of fear, totally, completely. Psychologically, we'll talk about. And the root of that, the beginning, from which all the oak tree grows, becomes enormous, the root of it is time and thought. Time being, I will be. If I'm not, I'm frightened. Right? Thought says, I have been, and my God, I hope I will be.
Is there a sort of fear that's not connected with thought? Or is all fear connected?
It's all connected with thought.
All connected with thought.
Of course.
There isn't if suddenly something happens to you which
Then
terrifies the organism...
At that second, there is no fear. But then thought comes.
The intervention of thought, however rapidly, beyond the speed of light, and then the reactive fear. Yes. Yes. Good.
Then the question, this very question arises, can thought in certain areas be active? Writing a letter and so on.
Right, like?
Writing a letter, writing, talking and so on.
Yeah.
Active, fully active. And other areas not at all, which in the psychological world, not at all.
Discursive thought I've never understood at all. I've never had any feeling for actually even putting sentences together. I've always felt that the things that have ever made sense to me have come like that. It's like sudden flashes of a thing.
Our thought is linear.
Well, we're trained in a linear way, but I've never felt comfortable.
We are trained, like the Chinese,
Sure.
It's still linear.
It is linear, that's right, yes. That's the schooling, isn't it? That's where you pass or fail your exam.
Thinking is a series of connections, associations, always.
So you're running a school based on thought to stop thinking?
No. Thought is necessary in certain areas. Absolutely. That requires great deal of attention, great deal of knowledge, great deal of capacity, skill, and ingenuity, invention.
Sure.
And is it that same activity has spilled over or extended into the other area?
Very good, yes, that's excellent. To know it where it's useful, to have it as a useful tool.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
If I understand, really see the depth of it, seriousness of it, then I question whether why is it thought is always moving, active in the psychological world. In the psychological world is the me. My consciousness, my failure, my success, my reputation, my I must be, I must not be. My faith, my belief, my dogma, my religious attitude, politics, fear, pains, pleasure, suffering, all that is me. All that is memory.
Yes. Yes.
So all that is memory. Me is memory.
And the me, if you're brought up in, like a lot of us are in this country, in an
all over the world.
all over the world maybe, in a sort of Bunyan tradition of you hold your own, you're responsible for yourself. I mean, there is an element, again, in which that makes sense. There's also an element in which it's quite destructive. I remember hearing somebody told me a story, I think in Japan, of, he said it was a possible way of life, a man running away from his own shadow, who then realized that all he had to do was to hop under a tree and the shadow disappeared. And I remember feeling immediately very Methodistical about that, thinking you may not get away from your shadow, but obviously you may and must.
The thought and time are the root of fear. Why does thought come into this world, into the area, realm of the psyche?
I wonder. Is it that it appears to stop danger, because when you have a thought, it's like asbestos to hold something hot. You have the illusion that with the thought you could control something which in its uncontrolled state might be overwhelming.
So that is, there is the thinker who holds something hot, and the thought that said don't hold it.
Yes. Beware.
So there is two separate entities, the thinker and the object of which you think. And now what is the thinker?
A thought.
Right?
Yeah.
Thought says, I'm the thinker, separate from...
Yeah.
But to realize that the observer, the thinker, the experiencer is the experience, is the object of one. They are not separate. So that means a tremendous revolution, inwardly, psychologically. Which means when there is no division, there is no conflict. There is only that fact. And when you give attention to the fact is burnt away. But thought is kept to plant a tree.
Yes, of course.
Bring that flower into.
Makes sense, yes.
So if you give attention to that, then that will never create problems. I don't...
Yeah, I understand. It's bringing, you see, everything we're saying is bringing something to a T-junction.
Yes, sir.
It's that, because we can't conceive, it's uncomfortable for us to think that you have to shed various ways of handling
the other day somebody said you have to burn your icons.
Burn your icons, indeed. Yes. And that's uncomfortable, and there's no way past it.
So, when you burn your icons, that is, you understand?
Yes.
And also, I don't know if you've gone into this, not theoretical, but actually. What is creation then? Not invention, I'm not talking invention. Invention is born out of knowledge. The scientists can invent more atom bombs, more, or something new. But it's always born out of knowledge.
What is creation in what sense?
Creation which is not born out of knowledge. Because knowledge is limited.
Is
Limited.
limited, yes, indeed.
Now or in the future.
And it's pre-limited. You know it.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
that's
limited.
right.
If creation is born of knowledge, it's not creation. It's invention, it is all kinds of things.
Certainly, even in my in whatever I've done, humdrum ways, there have been odd moments, maybe writing something, where it has not seemed, where certainly it was not any form of pre-knowledge which created it, but when my boundaries seemed almost to be illusory, and that I was not as confined for some reason, and then something else was fed in, and then you write something or you do something which has a muscle which is not yours.
Is creation must always be expressed? Yes?
Sorry,
Must it always be expressed? Put it into writing, in a sculpture, in doing painting. You follow?
Yes, I don't see why it should at all have to be expressed.
So, good. If we both of us see the fact that creation cannot be born out of knowledge.
Yes, that's for sure.
What is born out of knowledge is vast invention of various kinds and various levels and so on and so on.
Right.
But is there a state of mind, brain or mind, where knowledge is not? I mean, this is...
And where creation is.
Where creation is. You understand?
Yes, I do.
You understand what we're saying? Such danger, you know?
Well, I mean, there must... Yeah, there is. I'm sure there is.
I don't...
A lived... Why should one have to write it? That seems an awfully...
No, I mean, I don't know if... First of all, am I, who have been writing, talking, or inventing, and call my invention creation? I paint a picture. That is a marvelous creation. Leonardo paints something. That's what marvelous creation that is. We use that word both as an invention and also...
We do. It's an end stop. It's a product, isn't it? We use it as a product. But when you get the sketches by, say, a master, because we may as well use their example, a sketch, an incomplete thing, part of a process, somehow makes you tingle in a way that maybe the finished thing doesn't.
Of course.
Because the patron, the man who's paid for the picture, somehow comes into it frequently at a stage when it has to be completed, whereas the energy, whatever was going on in the making of it, didn't have to push it to that conclusion and is present in an early stage.
See, this has been one of the questions that have been asked by the most ancient people. That is there a state of mind, where knowledge ends? Though it's useful in other direction, don't just complete ending of it. Then only there is something new. And that thing is creation. That is creation. Understand?
The end of knowledge is creation itself, yes.
That's quite, I mean, not a discipline of conformity, but tremendous alertness inwardly. A sense of deep watchfulness that the other doesn't slip in.
You have to shed everything then. you wouldn't be who you are with all it, what, you know, it's a scary thought.